When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and the results will be their whole. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So good morning, everyone. I believe today is day 15 of the 3-week meditation session. We also have 5 days left. And I thought what would be nice is to go back to our theme for the retreat, which was on contemplative listening. And we wanted to go over 4 kinds of listening during this retreat. The first was listening to our bodies. So I hope in the last 15 days you had a chance to a little bit tune into the body, maybe stretch it out a little bit more, found the kind of inner alignment, the sense of inner integrity, the place you can be relaxed and at ease. And then we have the empathic listening, listening to the heart, kind of a willingness to meet whatever emotions, feelings, states, or experiences that we have with kindness, with acceptance, without needing to change it or judge it or criticize it, or just the ability to observe with care and compassion. So that was the second one, listening with loving kindness. The third one was on generative listening. And this is listening to the field, listening to the environment that we're in. We haven't really gone over it yet. And I thought this morning just to share a little bit about generative listening. Because another place that we can attune to that I think is an antidote for a way that practice can actually lead to isolation. We've been practicing for 15 days now, and the heart can become more quiet. And as it gets more quiet, we can begin to think other people are a little bit of a problem because they start to disturb my quiet. And so rather than the stillness of meditation leading to a kind of profound connection with all living beings, a care for all living beings, it can lead to kind of a closed heart, a kind of atomic individual trying to get enlightened. And so I think this generative listening is actually very important. Sometimes in the Theravada they describe, actually it's in the Pali Suttas quite a bit, sati sampajana. Sati is the mindfulness, staying attuned to our topic. Sampajana is the panoramic awareness, knowing what's going on around us. So over these last few days, I've kind of, you could say, observed just the community a little bit. And I feel, where do you see generative kind of qualities coming forward is really in service, is in how people work in harmony. And so, for instance, these last 2 days have been a little bit, you would say, there were more changes, I could say, trying to adjust the schedule to allow for another event at the same time, the Buddhist Global Relief Retreat. I can see people just naturally adapting, fitting in, working together. When it came times for chores, the person who needed to vacuum the hall would come a little bit earlier and vacuum before Jin Wei Shi or myself had to give the talk. And as people were trying to shift their chores and activities, I could see people teaching each other, oh, this is how you rake, this is how you sweep the leaves, this is how you clean the restrooms, this is how you do this and that. A kind of natural support for one another. And I think this is where the generative listening comes to the fore, is when we're listening, living in community and taking care of one another, taking care of the environment, allowing for all of us to practice, you can say practice in peace, practice in safety, practice in this field of loving kindness. So I was also reflecting on this generative listening. There's many places that we could go to, and I think when it really starts to work is actually when we really can quiet down our hearts and listen inward to see how we're actually connected to everyone. But I sometimes also find it's helpful to see some of these deeper patterns that exist in community, in ourselves. And that when we start to just kind of tune into that, we begin to see and hear and feel and intuit things that we otherwise wouldn't see. So one of these models that I have found very helpful are the 5 elements in Chinese culture, called the Wu Xing. It's interesting, they're translated as 5 elements because they're actually not actually the elements. They're called the 5 movements, the 5 dynamic processes. Xing actually means movement. So it's a kind of a Western, you could say, trying to make sense of the Chinese mind by making things more concrete. And so these 5 elements, or the 5 movements, describe patterns of, or say 5 patterns of activities or energies that you can see in many areas. And so I thought of just applying that to our community just to show another lens of what's going on. So one of these elements is fire. And what's the quality of fire? Clarity, direction. It's like the light. And so in our community here, what I found that fire element was being fulfilled by is our senior teachers giving us talks pretty much every day on the practice, providing clarity, direction. We know where we're going. There's some kind of confidence that comes from that sense of, I know where I'm going. And then the earth element. The earth element is associated with kind of groundedness, patience. And for that, I think it's our lineage. We also have Dharma Master Jing Fo here at the monastery, which I think is a lot of earth element. It kind of just comes in, gentle smile. Maybe he's not present in the meditation session, but his age and experience adds a kind of depth to the community. And in no way, I think, in our being here together, do we feel we're not on stable ground when it comes to spiritual practice. Our kind of roots are firm in Master Hua's Dharma, through Master Empty Cloud, tracing it all the way back to the Buddha. There's no question. We're not trying to prove our authenticity here. Many groups don't have that kind of, you could say, support. And so there's a lot of times a lot of need to say, I need to prove myself. I need to prove my roots. And for us, we can just relax. Our roots are deep. The only question is, can we really water those roots to have them, right, grow? And then there's the mental element. And the mental element is discerning, right? Metal cuts. And in this regard, I would say it's all of the participants, all of you here, that you're coming into this session and you're observing. You're trying to discern what's going on. How do I fit in? How do I practice? How does what is being shared make sense to me? How can I be of support to the community? It's kind of discerning quality of figuring out what's going on. And then there's the water quality of this kind of care, of not judging, of listening to everyone. In some sense, I think Jing Wei Shi has that quality. I try to support as well. And that's why we've been having a little bit of meetings, a little bit, just to hear where people are at, just to check in, so that there's this supportive care of listening. And finally, there's the wood element. The wood element is often associated with kind of the model, the kind of standard that you're following. In the family, is often considered the eldest kid. In traditional families, the eldest son. And they're supposed to lead the work. So they're trying to hold the standard of the family. And again, this I think is, to some extent, Jing Wei Shi and myself, but also some extent the three men who have been on the residential retreat right before, that naturally, since we've been here longer, those who come in, you are watching us. So what's going on? So these are the 5 elements. And to actually cultivate their wholesomeness, there's actually ways to do that. And there's also a way that they can become negative. So for instance, fire is very charismatic and clear. And it's usually still associated with the father role, right? Providing that clarity. But if it turns into hypocrisy, and they usually say it can be slipped because of sexual misconduct, then it goes a little bit off. Then the earth role can be patient and accepting. But that earth role can also become very stubborn and rigid. And always criticizing, like a rock. Yeah, it becomes like a rock. And, when you're around people who have that kind of rockish stubbornness, everything becomes hard to do. Right? Also in ourselves. So these qualities are in ourselves as well. And then there's the mental element. So that discrimination, that discernment, rather than going to helping the public good, looking for well-being, it becomes about right and wrong. I need to prove my point. I'm going to judge other people based on my kind of absolute way of seeing the world that's correct. And that cutting energy really starts to cut. And you can feel it. Even from somebody's eyes. They just look at you and you can see them judge you. And it can cut your, it feels like, ooh, okay, I'm going to avoid that person. Right? So that's the metal element used in an inappropriate way. The water element, because it's so mobile, what can happen with water is it absorbs so many things, it becomes very unclear. Murky water, turbid water. So it becomes diluted. It gets kind of lost. The quality of being able to receive everything actually ends up confusing it. So water gets turbid. And then for the wood element, so the wood really leads the work and is energetic. And when the wood element tries to be energetic and meets obstructions, what happens is often it gets angry. It gets impatient because it wants to get things done now. And that's the wood element going off. So it's interesting to me, in these 5 elements, when it comes to this generative listening, is that there's these deeper patterns going on in our lives, in our communities. Because each of these 5 we can also find in ourselves. We can cultivate in ourselves. And they're constantly changing. We move from community to community and it shifts. We go from moment to moment in our lives and it shifts. And I found that I've actually used them quite a bit in the spiritual life, because it provided a much more deeper sense of interconnectedness to myself and to those around me. And also cultivating the wholesome qualities kind of brightens the heart and creates a harmonious environment that we can all cultivate together in. So I think today, maybe if you wish, see if you can not just pay attention to whatever we're doing in our mind, or as we pay attention to what's going on in our mind, also see if we can train our panoramic awareness of tuning into the whole field of what's going on, not as a distraction, but actually as a deepening. Because those are all things going on right here, right now, as well. Okay, let's do 3 steps, 1 bow.